The day humanity left the Galactic Council, everything collapsed. Crumpled Part 1. The Grand Chamber of the Galactic Council sat high above the clouds of Xerxes Prime, a planet known for its crystal spires and endless skies. Inside, the air was cool and still, filled with the low hum of translation fields and the quiet rustle of robes from 200 different species. Some delegates had 6 arms, others floated in anti-grav pods, and a few communicated only through scent or color shifts. But all eyes were on the human section that morning. Daniel Morris stood slowly from his seat. He was not tall, not flashy, just a man in a plain gray suit with tired eyes and steady hands. He had spent the last 3 years as Earth's voice in this room, and every day had worn him down a little more. Today, though, he felt calm. He walked to the center speaking platform, his boots clicking softly against the polished floor. The council fell silent. Even the ever-chattering Glixians stopped their chirping. "I speak for the United Governments of Earth," Daniel began, his voice clear and quiet. "And today, we formally withdraw from the Galactic Council." A ripple of shock moved through the chamber. The Zenthar ambassador stiffened in his armored chair. The Cathari delegate's bioluminescent skin flickered red. Someone gasped, a rare sound in a room full of beings who didn't all breathe air. Daniel continued. "For 37 standard years, humanity has served as a member of this council. We've shared our science, our art, our labor. We've fought in your wars, rebuilt your cities, and fed your refugees. But in return, we've been treated as children. Our borders have been crossed without warning. Our data has been copied without consent. Our people have been detained under laws we never agreed to." He paused, not for effect, but because the weight of it all pressed on his chest like a stone. "You say we are equal members. But when push comes to shove, you remind us we are the youngest, the weakest, the newest. Well, we're done proving ourselves. Earth is leaving. Not out of anger, but out of dignity." He tapped a small device on his wrist. A soft chime echoed through the chamber. "The vote has already passed. Every human government, from the Americas to Southeast Asia, from Africa to Europe, agreed. As of this moment, humanity is no longer part of the Galactic Council." He turned and walked back to his seat. His aide, Lena Cruz, gave him a small nod. She had argued against this move for weeks, fearing the fallout. But now, seeing the resolve in his face, she understood. This wasn't rebellion. It was self-respect. The council president, a towering being from the Vrel system with skin like polished obsidian, rose slowly. "This is unexpected," she said, her voice filtered through a dozen harmonics. "Earth's contributions have been vital. Are you certain?" "Certain," Daniel replied without turning. The president sat down. Murmurs filled the room. Some species looked confused. Others looked angry. A few, like the quiet insectoid Mirathi, seemed almost relieved. They had never trusted humans anyway. Outside the chamber, the human delegation gathered in a waiting lounge. Lena checked her comms. Already, news feeds across the galaxy were lighting up with headlines. "Humans quit council. Sol system secedes. Is this the end of unity?" She sighed. "They're going to blame us for everything that goes wrong from now on." "Maybe," Daniel said, staring out the window at the twin suns setting over Xerxes Prime. "But we won't be there to clean it up." Back on Earth, in a small town in Oregon, a teenager named Jake Ellis was fixing his bike when the alert came through on his wristband. It was a public broadcast from the World Council. He stopped pedaling and listened as the calm voice of the Secretary General explained that humanity had left the Galactic Council. Jake didn't fully understand what it meant, but he felt a strange pride. His older sister, Maria, called from the porch. "Hey, you hear that?" "We're on our own now, cool," Jake said, though he wasn't sure if it was. Meanwhile, on Mars Colony 7, Nate Cruz, Lena's younger brother and a junior systems analyst, was running diagnostics on the Deep Space Relay Network. He noticed something odd, a tiny drop in signal stability from the outer rim. Probably nothing, he thought, just routine fluctuation. He logged it and moved on. He didn't know it yet, but that small glitch was the first thread pulling loose in a tapestry held together by human hands. As the human delegation boarded their shuttle for the trip back to the Sol system, Daniel looked one last time at the council spire. It gleamed in the twilight, beautiful and fragile. He wondered how long it would stand without the quiet work of human engineers, programmers and diplomats holding it up from the inside. He didn't say it out loud, but he knew. They'd built more than just machines and treaties. They'd built the invisible scaffolding that kept the whole thing from falling apart. And now, they were walking away. The shuttle lifted off. Below, the city of Unity shimmered under alien stars. Above, the void waited. Daniel leaned back in his seat, closed his eyes, and let out a breath he'd been holding for years. It was done. The day humanity left the Galactic Council, everything collapsed. Crumpled part toot first, nothing seemed to happen. The stars still shone, ships still flew, markets still buzzed with trade. The galaxy went on as if Earth's departure was just another political footnote, but deep in the bones of the system, something had shifted. On the Cathari command cruiser, Iron Wake, Captain Vorel checked his navigation screen. The ship was en route to patrol Sector 9, a routine mission, but the autocourse kept glitching. Coordinates flickered. The ship's AI stuttered, then rebooted. "Run diagnostics," Vorel ordered. The tech officer tapped furiously at his console. "All systems show green, but the pathing logic won't lock. It keeps asking for human verification. Human verification?" Vorel barked. "We haven't needed that since the Treaty of Sol." But the system wouldn't proceed. It sat frozen, waiting for a code only human engineers had ever used. The Iron Wake drifted, dead in space, for 6 hours before they manually overrode it, something no Cathari had done in decades. Meanwhile, on the agri-world Velis 9, the sky turned yellow. The atmospheric stabilizers designed to balance oxygen, nitrogen, and trace gases for mixed species farming began cycling erratically. Crops wilted within hours. The local overseer, a reptilian named Sasharn, shouted into his comm, "Why aren't the regulators responding?" "They are," came the reply from Central Control. "But the biofeedback loop requires a human biosignature to recalibrate. We don't have one." Sasharn stared at his dying fields. "We never needed one before." He didn't know that human scientists had built a silent safeguard into every major life support system after the Velis famine of 2184. Back then, an alien algorithm had misjudged soil toxicity and poisoned half a continent. Humans insisted on a final human-in-the-loop check for any major environmental override. The Council had agreed, then forgotten. Now without that check, the machines refused to act. On Xerxes Prime, panic began to spread. Trade ships from the Outer Rim reported delays. Cargo drones wouldn't unload. Customs gates stayed shut. Even the food synthesizers in the Council mess hall started producing bland nutrient paste instead of proper meals. "It says the flavor profiles are locked," complained a Glixian delegate poking at his gray mush. Lena Cruz watched it all from her apartment in Lunar City, sipping coffee as news alerts piled up on her screen. She'd returned to Earth 2 days after the withdrawal. Now she monitored the chaos from afar. Not with guilt, but with quiet understanding. She knew what was happening. She'd seen the reports before she left. Human engineers had never hidden their work, but no one had bothered to learn how it truly functioned. They assumed it just worked, but it didn't. It worked because humans made it work. On Mars Colony 7, Nate Cruz finally noticed the pattern. Relay after relay, station after station, each one showed the same tiny error. A missing handshake signal from Earth-based verification servers. He pulled up an old schematic. His eyes widened. "Oh no," he whispered. He called his sister. "Lena, it's starting." "I know," she said softly. "Do they know it's us?" They will soon. Back on Earth, in a quiet suburb of Phoenix, Ryan Cole was teaching his daughter how to fix a solar inverter when his old military comms unit buzzed. It was an emergency channel unused for years. He answered. A voice he hadn't heard since the Titan conflict said, "Ryan, they're calling. The Zenthar fleet is stranded near the Helios belt. Their comms are down. They think it's sabotage." Ryan sighed. "It's not sabotage. It's just how it was built." He looked at his daughter, who was carefully tightening a bolt. "Tell them to read the manual," he said, and ended the call. But there was no manual. Not really. The knowledge lived in the minds of people like Ryan, Tina Garza, and thousands of others who had quietly maintained the galaxy's infrastructure for decades. Now those people were home and the machines were confused. On the trade hub of Nix 4, riots broke out when water recyclers shut down. The system claimed contamination risk but offered no solution. A crowd gathered outside the central plant, shouting at the sealed doors. A Marathi merchant tried to hack the control panel. Sparks flew. The system went dark. 3 systems over, a medical frigate carrying plague vaccines lost power to its cryostasis units. The onboard AI flashed a warning. Human bioapproval required for emergency override. The ship's doctor, a soft-spoken Vrelian, stared at the screen. She had no idea what that meant. By the time they rerouted through a non-council channel, half the doses were ruined. The council scrambled. Emergency sessions were called. Committees formed. Experts consulted. But none of them had ever truly understood the human layer woven into their technology. They'd treated it like magic, something that just happened. Now the magic was gone. Daniel Morris watched the news from his home in New Hampshire. He saw footage of stranded ships, empty markets, confused officials. He felt no joy, only sadness. "We didn't break it," he told his daughter Lily, who sat beside him on the porch. "We just stopped holding it together. Will they fix it?" she asked. "Maybe," he said, "but not the way they think." On the Lunar Gateway Station, a Cathari freighter docked, its crew desperate for help. They begged the human portmaster to reset their nav core. The portmaster, a woman named Maria Lopez, shook her head. "I can't, not without authorization." "But our children are on that ship," the Cathari captain said, voice cracking. Maria looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, "You treated us like servants for 40 years. Now you want us to save you like saviors?" She walked away. But later that night, she quietly sent a data packet to their ship, a temporary bypass key. No name attached. No message. Just a fix because even in withdrawal, some humans couldn't watch others suffer. Still, the silence spread. Not the silence of peace, but the silence of systems shutting down one by one, like lights going out in a vast empty house. And no one knew how to turn them back on. The day humanity left the Galactic Council, everything collapsed. Crumpled part 3 weeks passed, and the silence grew louder. What began as small glitches turned into full breakdowns. Entire sectors of the galaxy slowed to a crawl. Ships floated without power. Cities ran low on clean water. Hospitals rationed medicine. The Council's emergency broadcasts sounded more desperate with each passing day. They blamed software errors, cosmic interference, even sabotage, but never the truth. They had leaned on humanity for so long they forgot how to stand alone. On the mining moon of Kesar 5, the gravity regulators failed. Workers from 6 species tumbled into the air as artificial gravity flickered in and out. Alarms blared, but the safety protocols wouldn't activate. The system demanded a human voice print to confirm an emergency. No one on the moon had one. It took 3 days for a rescue ship to arrive, and by then, 12 lives were lost. News of the accident spread fast. Fear spread faster. Back on Earth, life went on as usual. Kids went to school. Farmers planted crops. Factories hummed. Most people didn't know the full extent of the chaos unfolding light years away. They saw headlines, sure, but it felt distant, like a storm on another planet. Jake Ellis, the teenager from Oregon, was more worried about his math test than galactic politics. His sister Maria, now working at a solar farm in Nevada, heard rumors from off-world traders passing through lunar orbit, but she shrugged them off. "Let them figure it out," she said. They had their chance. But not everyone felt that way. In Houston, Tina Garza sat in her small workshop surrounded by old circuit boards and data chips. She had retired from deep space engineering 5 years ago, but her hands still remembered every line of code she'd ever written. Her comm pinged. It was an old colleague from the Velis 9 project. "Tina, the stabilizers are down, crops are dying. Can you send the override sequence?" She stared at the message. She could. It would take 2 minutes. But sending it would mean stepping back, into a system that never valued her as an equal, only as a fixer. She thought of her granddaughter who wanted to be an engineer. She thought of all the times she'd been told her designs were too human to be trusted. She didn't reply. Meanwhile, on Mars Colony 7, Nate Cruz worked late into the night. He'd mapped the collapse like a disease spreading through a body. Every failing system traced back to the same root, the absence of human verification layers. He showed his findings to his supervisor. "We have to warn them," Nate said. "Warn who?" his boss asked. "Earth's not in the council anymore. It's not our problem." "It's everyone's problem," Nate insisted. But orders were orders. He was told to stop monitoring off-world systems. He obeyed, but not before copying his data to a private drive. On Xerxes Prime, the council's grand spire stood empty most days. Delegates stayed home, afraid to travel. Trade had nearly stopped. Food shortages hit the lower districts first. Riots broke out near the old human embassy, now shuttered and dark. Someone spray-painted on the wall, "You left us to die." Lena Cruz saw the image on a newsfeed. She felt a pang, but not guilt. "We didn't leave you to die," she whispered to the screen. "We left because you wouldn't let us live as equals." Still, the suffering weighed on her. She remembered the Cathari children she'd met during peace talks, bright-eyed, curious, full of questions about Earth's oceans and trees. Were they cold now? Hungry? She didn't know. In a quiet village in Kentucky, Ryan Cole fixed a neighbor's water pump. It was simple work, honest work. No politics, no galactic stakes. Just pipes and pressure and clean water. As he wiped grease from his hands, his daughter asked, "Dad, are we bad for not helping them?" He thought for a long time. "No," he finally said. "We're not bad for choosing ourselves. They had years to learn how things worked. They chose not to. That's on them." But later that night he logged into an old secure channel, one only retired engineers knew about. He typed a short message. "The key isn't in the code. It's in the logic. Look for the human layer." He sent it to a public forum used by alien techs. Then he logged out and never mentioned it again. Some would find it. Most wouldn't. On the agri-world Velis 9, Sisharn walked through his ruined fields. The soil was dry. The air tasted wrong. His people were eating stored rations, but those wouldn't last. He sat on a broken irrigation drone and stared at the sky. For the first time, he wondered what Earth's fields looked like. Did their crops grow without machines? Did their engineers walk among the plants feeling the soil with their bare hands? He didn't know. He'd never asked. Back in Lunar City, Maria Lopez got another message. This time it was from a Zenthar medic. "Our children are sick. The vaccine coolers won't restart. Please." Maria read it 3 times. Then she typed a single line of code and sent it. No name, no note. Just the fix. She knew she shouldn't. But she also knew what it felt like to watch someone suffer when you had the power to help. The galaxy kept crumbling. Not with explosions or wars, but with quiet failures. Lights that wouldn't turn on, doors that wouldn't open, machines that simply stopped trying. And through it all, humanity stayed quiet. Not out of cruelty, but out of exhaustion. They had given everything for decades. Now they were learning to breathe without carrying the weight of 200 species on their backs. In New Hampshire, Daniel Morris took his daughter Lily for a walk in the woods. The trees were green. The birds sang. The air smelled like rain and pine. "Is the galaxy really falling apart?" Lily asked. "Parts of it," Daniel said. "Will it come back? Only if they learn to build something new, not just copy what we made." She nodded, satisfied. Far away in the dark between stars, a Cathari ship finally got its engines working, not by finding a human, but by rewriting its own logic from scratch. It was slow, it was messy, but it worked. Somewhere, a seed had been planted, and on Earth, millions of ordinary people lived their ordinary lives, unaware that their silence was the loudest lesson the galaxy had ever heard. The day humanity left the Galactic Council, everything collapsed. Crumpled Part 4 after 6 weeks of silence, the Council broke. Not with weapons or war, but with a single message sent on every open channel. "We need to talk." It was signed by all 200 member species. The words were simple, but the meaning was clear. They had tried to fix things on their own. They had failed. Now they were coming to Earth, not as rulers, but as beggars. The delegation arrived at the Lunar Gateway Station 3 days later. Their ships were battered, their uniforms worn. They didn't fly in with fanfare or escorts. They came quietly, like people who had lost everything and weren't sure they deserved to ask for help. The lead envoy was Corvell, the Zenthar elder who had once called human ideas primitive during a council debate. Now his armor was dull, his voice softer than anyone had ever heard it. They were met by a small human team. No soldiers, no banners, just a few officials in plain clothes. Lena Cruz stood at the front, arms crossed, expression unreadable. She had not forgotten the years of condescension. The times her reports were ignored, her warnings dismissed. But she also remembered the children in the Zenthar refugee camps she'd helped during the border wars. She let them land. Inside the station's main hall, the air was cool and still. The aliens stood in a loose group, uneasy on human-made floors. Lena didn't offer seats. "You wanted us gone," she said. "Why are you here?" Kor stepped forward. His species rarely bowed, but he lowered his head slightly. "We were wrong," he said. The words seemed to cost him. "We thought your systems were just tools. We didn't understand they were part of a larger design, one that required your presence to function fully." "You treated our work like magic," Lena replied. "Magic you didn't have to understand because we were always there to fix it." Another delegate, a small furred being from the Myrathi collective, spoke up. "We tried to rebuild the logic, but every time we got close, something failed. Not because the code was broken, but because it was built with human thinking. We don't think like you." Lena nodded slowly. That was the truth no one had wanted to admit. Human engineers didn't just write instructions. They built judgment, ethics, and caution into their systems. They asked, "What if this hurts someone?" before, "Will this work?" Most alien tech prioritized efficiency above all. Humans prioritized life. "Earth isn't rejoining the Council," Lena said firmly. "That chapter is closed." Kor's shoulders slumped. But then Lena added, "But that doesn't mean we won't help." Hope flickered in their eyes. She led them to a secure conference room where Daniel Morris waited. He hadn't come as a politician, but as a representative of the people who had actually built the failing systems. Engineers, doctors, farmers, programmers. He sat at a plain table, no podium, no title, just a man who knew what it meant to hold things together. "We're not giving you back the old systems," Daniel said. "They were too dependent on us. That wasn't healthy, for you or for us." "Then what do you offer?" asked a Cathari officer, voice tight with worry. "Knowledge," Daniel said. "Not control. Not oversight. Just understanding. We'll show you how the systems work, not so you can copy them, but so you can build your own that include your values and ours." Kor looked confused. "You would share your secrets freely?" "Not secrets," Daniel corrected. "Solutions. And only if you agree to 3 things," he held up one finger. "First, full recognition of human sovereignty. No more inspections, no more data grabs, no more temporary occupations of our space. 2 fingers. Second, reparations for past violations, resources, technology, and open access to your research shared fairly. 3 fingers. Third, a new charter. Not a council that rules, but a network that listens. Every species, including Earth, has equal voice. No more senior members. No more hidden hierarchies." The room was silent. The aliens exchanged glances. These terms were generous and humbling. They gave Earth everything it had ever asked for. Kor spoke for them all. "We accept." Daniel didn't smile. He just nodded. "Then we begin tomorrow." Over the next few days, human specialists arrived at the lunar station. Tina Garza came from Houston, carrying a worn tablet full of schematics. Ryan Cole flew in from Kentucky, his hands still smelling of soil and oil. Even Jake Ellis's sister Maria showed up, sent by the Mars colony to help with life support diagnostics. They didn't wear uniforms. They wore jeans and work shirts. They brought coffee, snacks, and patience. The first lesson wasn't about code or circuits. It was about why. "Why did you build the safety check into the water recyclers?" asked a young Vrelian engineer. "Because on Earth we learned the hard way that clean water isn't a luxury. It's a right," Tina said. "So we made sure no machine could cut it off without a human saying, 'Yes, this is truly necessary.'" The aliens listened. Really listened. For the first time, they saw human tech not as strange or inefficient, but as deeply human. Flawed, careful, and kind. Nate Cruz joined the team too. He showed them his map of the collapse. "See this pattern?" he said, pointing to a cluster of failures near the Helios belt. "It's not random. It's where your systems assumed humans would always be nearby to correct errors. You built dependence without realizing it." The Cathari officer who had spoken earlier looked ashamed. "We thought you were weak for needing so many checks. We thought you were reckless for having none," Nate replied gently. Slowly, trust began to grow. Not the blind trust of before, but something real, earned through honesty and shared work. Back on Earth, ordinary people watched the news with cautious hope. Lily Morris asked her father, "Are they really changing?" "Some are," he said. "Change is slow, but it's starting." On the lunar station, As the sun rose over the moon's gray plains, Corvell stood beside Daniel, looking out at the stars. "We thought leaving the council would make you small," Cor admitted. "Instead, it showed us how large you truly are." Daniel didn't answer right away. Then he said, "We're not large. We're just finally being seen." And for the first time in decades, that was enough. The day humanity left the Galactic Council, everything collapsed. Crumpled Part 5 months passed and the galaxy began to heal. Not by returning to the way things were, but by building something new. The old council was gone, replaced by the Solus Network. A loose alliance based on shared knowledge, not control. Humans didn't lead it. They simply joined it as equals among equals. No special seats, no hidden authority. Just voices in a room. All listened to the same. On the Lunar Gateway Station, human engineers worked side by side with Cathari coders, Zenthar mechanics, and Myrathi logic weavers. Tina Garza taught a class on failsafes that put life before speed. Ryan Cole showed alien farmers how to read soil not just with sensors, but with their hands. Maria Lopez helped redesign water recyclers so they could be maintained by any species, using open-source logic anyone could understand. The systems they built together were slower, sometimes messier, but they were honest. They carried the lessons of collapse in every line of code. Back on Earth, life stayed quiet. Jake Ellis graduated high school and signed up for an off-world internship, not as a soldier or diplomat, but as a junior systems helper on Velis 9. His sister Maria smiled when she heard. "You're going to teach them how to grow food again," she said. "That's better than any war." In New Hampshire, Daniel Morris walked his daughter Lily to school most mornings. The trees were full of leaves, the air sweet with summer. Lily carried a small data pad, not for games, but for a pen pal program with a young Zenthar girl. They wrote about stars, pets, and what scared them. Lily's latest message read, "I used to think aliens were scary. Now I think they're just people who forgot to say thank you." Daniel read it over her shoulder and said nothing, but his eyes were soft. On Mars Colony 7, Nate Cruz became the head of the new Interstellar Knowledge Exchange. His job wasn't to fix things, but to make sure no one ever had to depend on a single species again. He created a public archive where every system design, human or alien, was stored in plain language, with videos, diagrams, and voice notes explaining the why behind each choice. It was the opposite of secrecy. It was trust made visible. The first major test came when the outer rim faced a solar flare storm. In the old days, human engineers would have quietly rerouted power, stabilized grids, and saved the day without credit. This time, the Cathari fleet activated their own emergency protocols. Protocols they'd co-designed with Ryan and Tina. They worked. Not perfectly, but well enough. No one died. No cities went dark. And for the first time, the Cathari sent a public message. We did it, with help, but by our own hands. Earth's news networks played the clip. People nodded, then went back to their work. There was no celebration, no prideful speeches, just quiet satisfaction that others were learning to stand on their own. Lena Cruz moved to a small station near the asteroid belt, running a training center for young engineers from all species. She didn't teach them to copy human ways. She taught them to ask questions. Who does this help? Who might it hurt? What happens if it fails? Those questions, she said, were more important than any code. One evening, as she watched a group of Myrathi students debug a food synthesizer together with a human teen from Phoenix, she felt something she hadn't in years. Peace. Not because humanity was needed, but because they were finally seen. Not as servants, not as saviors, but as neighbors. The galaxy didn't go back to normal. It couldn't. Too much had been broken, too many lies exposed. But in the broken places, new things grew. Trade returned, but now contracts included mutual aid clauses. Ships carried not just cargo, but shared repair kits and open manuals. Schools taught not just math and science, but ethics and humility. And through it all, humanity stayed steady. They didn't rush to fill every gap. They waited. They listened. They offered help only when asked, and always with respect. On a clear night in Oregon, Jake stood on his old porch, now empty since he'd left for Velis 9. His parents watched the stars and thought of him. They knew he wasn't changing the galaxy. He was just planting seeds, fixing pipes, teaching kids how to test soil. Small things. Human things. But those small things were what had held the galaxy together all along. In the Solus Network's first joint project, Every species contributed to rebuilding the Velis 9 farms. The Zenthar provided shield tech to protect crops from radiation. The Myrathi designed pollination drones that mimicked local insects. Humans shared heirloom seeds and crop rotation methods from Earth's own history of recovery. The first harvest was modest, but it was shared by all. At the celebration, Corvel stood beside Daniel again. "You could have taken control when we were weak," Cor said. "We did that once," Daniel replied. "It didn't end well for anyone," Cor nodded. "Now we build together." "Now we build together," Daniel agreed. Far away on a quiet hill in Kentucky, Ryan Cole sat with his daughter under a sky full of stars. She asked, "Do you think they'll ever forget us again?" "Maybe," he said. "But now they know how to find their way back, not to us, but to each other." And in that moment, the galaxy didn't need saving. It just needed to keep learning. Humanity wasn't the center anymore. They weren't the glue, the engine, or the silent backbone. They were simply part of the whole, visible, valued, and finally free. The lights stayed on, not because humans held them up, but because everyone had learned how to keep them burning together. And somewhere, in the vast dark between stars, the universe breathed easier.